Pakistani government says it's seeing a new influx of Afghans trying to get away from the Taliban takeover. Well, now Pakistan is calling for an international conversation about how to manage the unfolding humanitarian crisis. Pakistan is offering help to foreign journalists, for example. It's offering a lifeline to journalists stranded in Afghanistan by relaxing its visa rules to those who want to leave. Well, my next guest is معید Yusuf, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister of Pakistan. He joins us now from Islamabad, Pakistan, via Skype. And, sir, a very simple question to you at this point. Do you expect a Taliban takeover of the entire country?
Thanks, Becky. I don't know. All I can tell you is Pakistan is very, very worried because we are the only country, apart from Afghanistan, that cannot afford a protracted conflict. We have been the victim of this war next door for over 4 decades. Over 4 million refugees in Pakistan, still in Pakistan. Societal distortions that came here, millions of displaced people in Pakistan, which we have suffered again and again, even though the world does not want to acknowledge that. For us, a protracted conflict is simply not an option. That's why, unlike many other countries who are talking about, oh, this will go through a conflict and then maybe we get to peace, we are saying reinvigorate the political settlement effort. The US must take the lead. Pakistan will do whatever it can, but the world needs to come together to find a way to stop the violence, and the only way to do that is an inclusive political settlement in Afghanistan. Afghans are dying every day, and I'm sorry to say, but a lot of times the Western conversation treats them as commodities. These are people who deserve peace. Pakistanis are people who deserve peace. We've lost over 80,000 people, Becky. We've $150 billion lost in the economy. Our people can't take it anymore. We feel very worried with what is happening, but even more worried when we hear that maybe the mistakes of the 1990s are being repeated. Maybe the US and the West are checking out, and maybe the world doesn't care anymore what happens to Pakistan and this region.
Let me put this to you. Afghan leaders, including President Ghani, have accused Pakistan of actively supporting the Taliban. And we hear this across international circles as well. Hashtag sanctioned Pakistan is even trending in Afghanistan, suggesting those sentiments are shared by a significant portion of the Afghan people. Just how would you describe Pakistan's support of the Taliban?
First, let me talk about the sanctions Pakistan, because just 2 days ago, I did a press conference in Pakistan showing data that 65% of what was said to make that hashtag was bot activity. The rest was Afghan and Indian accounts propagating that. It was all made up, Becky. So that said, let me get to the question of the Taliban. You see, we have heard for a long time, oh, Pakistan is the problem. Today, don't listen to me. Just look at the ground reality in Afghanistan. The running government, what have they been trying to absolve themselves of? An army that doesn't fight for them, a country where they don't seem to have any legitimacy, people who are standing behind an opposition, a fighting force, and celebrating their coming in. If there were any sanctuaries in Pakistan, that's the question that is always asked. Tell me, it defies logic that the entire region of Afghanistan that has fallen to the Taliban initially is the north, bordering the Central Asian republics, and the west, bordering Afghanistan, hundreds of miles away from Pakistan.
Let me ask you this.
Let me just say.
Let me put this to you. Hang on. Let me put this to you. Is it true that Pakistan permits the Taliban leadership on its territory, its wounded warriors? And this was, this has been written about in an article today, and people have talked about it for a long time, receive treatment in Pakistani hospitals. Are you sitting here today and telling me that that is simply not true?
I am telling you that if there were any Taliban of note in Pakistan, this was the moment they would have crossed over into Afghanistan and taken the south and east of Afghanistan. That's been their stronghold in the past. None of that has happened. Why? Because these people are not here. Becky, 70% of Afghanistan is in their control. Afghanistan is the safe haven. They've got the entire territory. So let's end this blame game. Pakistan has hosted, as I've told you, millions of refugees. We have lost thousands of people. Pakistanis feel insulted when we hear do more. After everything we've done for Afghanistan, we are still willing to do for Afghanistan. The worry is that the world may have just washed its hands clean of the mess that's been created. I am seeing Western media and press rightly and courageously talk about what happened to the trillions of dollars. That's where the failure is. But let's forget that. Where do we go from here? Pakistan has played a constructive role throughout, and today I'm saying again, history will judge us very, very poorly if we don't make every effort to get all Afghans to the table and see if we can find a political end to this war. My Prime Minister Imran Khan is the only Prime Minister who said for 15 years regularly that there is no military solution. There is only a political solution. Everybody agrees today. But even now, I'm sorry to say, the Afghan government is not cooperating, it seems, because even their team that's sitting in Doha is not empowered to negotiate.
Let me put this argument to you then. Let me put this argument to you then. The security establishment in Pakistan plays a double game. I hear this from sources again and again and again. Outwardly looking to, and it has to be said, and we'll talk about this, the leverage that Pakistan feels it has because it does have contacts with the Taliban, its leverage in the potential for a negotiated settlement here, and we will talk about that because that's incredibly important, and you started this conversation with that. And yet the secret harbouring of Osama bin Laden in the past and the relations that same security establishment has with Taliban when it suits that security establishment to play a game on Pakistan's behalf in Afghanistan. I just want to put that to you, this sense of a double game. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, because, you know, I lived in the US for years and heard this all the time. First of all, let me just say, once again, Pakistan lost thousands, 80,000 on the hands of who? The Pakistani Taliban. Where do they sit? They sit in Afghanistan. Use Afghan territory in collusion with the Indians to attack Pakistanis. We would have to be mad, nothing short of that, if we think that we can play any double game where Pakistanis are dying. That would mean we don't care about Pakistani lives. I am telling you, we care about not only Pakistani, but Afghan lives as much. That's why I'm questioning this idea that, oh, let there be conflict and then we'll figure it out. Or we are done, Pakistan can deal with the mess. Let's deal with this problem as it is. There is no double game. I've told you, if there was any, wouldn't the South and East fall if there were people in Pakistan? Wouldn't there be celebrations? We are saying we're extremely worried. We've gone public. We have said we are not for a forceful takeover. What else? We have fenced our border completely. Becky, this is an important point, if you allow me. If Pakistan was the country where people were going from, why would we fence our border completely, ask for biometrics on the border, and the Afghans refused? They opposed fencing the border. Whose sincerity should be questioned? If they were worried about people crossing over, they should be the ones excited about the fencing. Okay. It's the opposite.
Let me talk about that border. Let's talk about that border. What is going on at present? And as far as you understand it, is the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan still out of Taliban control at this point? And you have said that you are offering safe haven to foreign journalists. What about Afghans? What about Afghan journalists, for example, whose lives are at stake at this point? Let's just be clear about the offer that Pakistan is making at this point.
First of all, the border. This border, about 2,600 kilometers, 1,600 miles, has always been porous. 20 to 25,000 people cross over every day. So when there is a question on who crossed over, is there an undesirable person? Whenever there is any question, you find that in the Afghan refugee settlements of millions, you find some undesirable activity, then we are blamed for it. We asked the world for years and years, please arrange a dignified repatriation of the refugees. There is no response, but the blame comes on Pakistan. What have we done to answer this? What we have done is we fenced the entire border. We have then asked the Afghans to put biometrics so that both of us can see who's crossing. They refused. We then said, let's do joint border management. They refused. We have said, let's go to a formal visa regime because traditionally people just used to cross with a small ID card. They are opposing that tooth and nail. Every single thing. We've even gone to the extent of saying, you have a problem, come to us, we'll We'll go to the place in Pakistan, show us what the problem is. No response. Becky, enough of scapegoating. Please don't blame the victim. The reality today is naked. The problems were always in Afghanistan. We are seeing those problems play out. I don't remember any time in history and such a fight would happen where everybody would surrender after $1 trillion gone into this. Let's focus on how to fix the problem. We still think it can be done through a political process, but only if the US takes the lead. Right now, we are seeing people just finding scapegoats. Pakistan is not going to be one. I want to be clear about that.
Let's talk about this then. Go on, please, just very, very briefly. What are you going to do about Afghan journalists, for example, not just Western journalists who may be looking for a way out?
I'm not aware of any specifics on the Afghan journalists or any offer. What I will tell you is nobody has been more generous in housing Afghans. There are brothers and sisters. We would still love to do that, but unfortunately, we do not have the capacity to entertain more refugees. The international community needs to step up. So far, we haven't seen anything. As far as specific journalists are concerned, I'm frankly not aware of any offer from any sort of concern from Afghanistan or any demand.
I'm going to take a very, very short break at this point because I want to bring you back and talk about what we're going to do or what you believe can be done in any sort of potential for a negotiated settlement. But let's have that conversation after this short break. Stay with me. Welcome back. I'm Becky Anderson. You're watching Connect the World. Our top story this hour, the remarkable advances that the Taliban is making across Afghanistan, now controlling half of the provincial capitals, and a real fear in Afghanistan of the takeover of Kabul at some point soon. I'm speaking with the National Security Advisor to the Pakistan Prime Minister, معید Yusuf, about these advances in neighbouring Afghanistan. So earlier today, you said, and I'm paraphrasing you here, there are chances the Taliban present some settlement that's not a Western settlement. I just wonder what that settlement would look like at this point, to your mind.
I don't know, Becky. That's an answer that only Afghans, the Afghan government, the Taliban, and all other Afghan political actors who matter will decide once they sit in one room, they are empowered, and they come up with a decision on how to run their country going forward. The only point Pakistan is making is we are not seeing a wholehearted, sincere effort at this point to try and get to that political settlement. What would we have the US do in this case? Number one, there is confusion on the ground. I'll be very frank with you. Is the world checking out and abandoning Afghanistan just like the 1990s, or is it true withdrawal which will be matched by a reinvigorated political settlement effort and an economic plan for Afghanistan? Not just words that we'll keep paying money, but a plan. There is confusion. If it's the former, I'm afraid not much can happen. I can recall the US President George W. Bush saying never again will be abandoned. I have in front of me Secretary Hillary Clinton's statement. It's one thing to pull out troops that have been supporting security in Afghanistan, but leaving it pretty much to fend for themselves. We can't afford to walk away from the consequences of that decision. People are asking, is it that decision, or is the US going to take the lead and the world going to take the lead to get to a political settlement? We want to see that. We want to see an economic plan. Pakistan will do whatever it can to facilitate both of these, but we need public assurances. Afghans need public assurances that the US is going to remain involved and see this through. Otherwise, militias, warlordism, that's been the history, and that would be maybe bad for the world, but an absolute disaster for Pakistan. Last time this happened, as I told you, we're still reeling from those effects, and we are not going to be able to go there again.
I have to ask you, will Islamabad work with a Taliban government should they be able to capture Kabul and re-establish their control?
I don't have the luxury to think about that, Becky. The only thing as a Pakistani policymaker is peace, 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 and the only way to get there is through an inclusive political settlement. Let's make all efforts. Even if it were not to work out, let's make all efforts. That is what we and the Afghan people deserve, and that's what the international community owes to them. But Pakistan remains a partner in peace, not in conflict.
Your government has repeatedly said that you support an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. Is that your position today?
Absolutely, and that is the only way to do it. No better time to reinforce that, because after 20 years of outsiders trying to fix the problem, we have got nothing to show for it. In fact, unfortunately, it seems to have been a net negative. So only Afghans can decide, Afghan-owned, Afghan-led, supported by everybody else, and assurance that nobody will interfere, and that's Pakistan's position. And we also want to make sure Afghan soil is not used against any country. Pakistan has suffered again because of terrorism coming from Afghanistan, supported directly by our hostile eastern neighbor, India.
Are you as surprised by the speed of the Taliban advances in the country, as surprised as so many others, including the US administration, it seems? And how has the Taliban achieved this, to your mind?
Look, first of all, I think everybody is surprised, if not stunned, at the pace. But here's the question I have, Becky. We were sitting next door, but the international forces were in Afghanistan for 20 years. They had all the intelligence, all the information. I cannot believe that there wasn't clarity in that community of what would happen if an abrupt withdrawal happened. It's a US decision, we respect it, but we had always talked about its responsible withdrawal, where the political settlement came before this kind of exodus. Today, again, we have proven right. The Pakistani Prime Minister kept saying, go for a political solution when you are present there, and then withdraw responsibly. Opposite has happened. I don't frankly believe that this is a surprise that the Taliban are doing. This is all the intelligence in the world that was available to the forces who were there. So then the question comes, why has this been done? And people are asking, is stability really the ultimate goal? Because if we knew instability would come, unfortunately, I have to tell you, from Pakistan's perspective, this is deja vu. The deja vu is that you're leaving the world is leaving Pakistan to deal with a impossible situation next door. It's very unfair. We've, been scapegoated enough. Now is the time for everybody to step up, make sure Afghans are treated like humans. People are talking about refugees as if these are just commodities who will flow over. No, we must ensure that the situation doesn't get to the point where Afghans have to leave their country for decades and decades again. We must make sure there is peace, and the only way, I keep repeating, is to get everybody in one room. And if there's anybody who's an obstacle, anybody, they need to be told that this has to happen. The US still has tremendous leverage over Kabul. I think there needs to be more effort made there, because unfortunately, again, what Kabul is spending time on is creating Twitter trends, fictitious trends, telling the world they're still in control. Doesn't seem to be the case.
With that, we're going to leave it there. We thank you very much indeed for your perspective today, the National Security Advisor for Pakistan's Prime Minister. Well, the United